G'day, today I'm going to show you how to brew this beer. Meaty, beaty, big and bouncy. If you've seen my other videos, you'll know how much work I've put into this. It's been a long few months, 6 batches, but the results are totally worth it. Last week I showed you the no-chill version. This is the full-on 20 grams a litre dry hop, in your face version. It's called Green Greed. It's a little bit of a, I might even call it Green Deeds. It's a little bit of homage to Quiet Deeds, or they're not Quiet Deeds anymore, they are Deeds Brewing. And if you like your Deeds beers and you like your mountain culture type things, this beer is for you. It doesn't mess around and it's still standing strong over a month in the keg. Let's dive in and we'll have a chat at the end. G'day, we are in the brewery again today. We are going to brew a 3-oat cream NIPA. You might have seen my Sabro tooth. I've brewed a lot of NIPAs in the past, all different sorts. I even made up my own style, the NEIPA, which a brewery has brewed. I don't know if they use my recipe, but they've used the name in Australia somewhere. If I can remember, I'll put the link down below. As I said, I've brewed a lot of NIPAs before, but these last 4 I've brewed in a row. I'm sort of pushing towards that, the real modern version, big, thick, ridiculous dry hop amounts. But this is the oat cream that I brewed after that. Experimental. I used flour, oat flour and wheat flour, not for the cloudiness, just so I could fit it in the mash. We'll talk more about that when I talk about this recipe. So this is the second NEIPA oat cream style. I was really happy with this. Oh, it's just good. I did hold back on the hops. I don't think, I didn't want to waste, I wasn't sure, I didn't want to waste, 15 grams a litre dry hop. I wanted to get the body right first. And I can tell you, I'm really happy with this. The other thing I'm doing, which is using what they call the Pro bottom screen for the Brewzilla or the Robo Brews, which just means it hasn't got a hole or an overflow pipe. Now don't use these if you're not comfortable with it. I won't do it because it's very noisy now, but you just slide it down the bottom. Hang on. Like that. And of course there's no overflow pipe, so you've just got to be really careful. I know some people have done the same thing by blocking the hole of the version you get with the unit. And Kegland sell these plugs that people have been using. Mine doesn't seem to fit. Mine is a very early version. Maybe they've changed the threads slightly, but it fits in enough to work. Like you can screw that in and it is going to stay there. You put it in the bottom, the bottom might hit your bottom screen, but anyway, yeah, it's a 1/2 inch BSP. Yeah, but that's up to you. You can try that, or you can just use the overflow pipe as per normal. 22 litres of strike water. I've had it at 72 degrees strike temp. And we're going to go for a mash of about 67 degrees. I'm not using filtered water today just to keep it easy. And I am adding all of my salts to the mash water and none to the sparge. Some recipes that works out, some recipes it doesn't. And I also add my 4 ml of lactic acid just to get that pH down.
We'll just have a quick look at the grain. That's the crush I have. It might have been a little bit of a rough crush, but there's still plenty of whole husks there. Now if you haven't seen it, I did record a full video where I went through all the recipes I did. You'll get a lot of hints and tips from those recipes, so it is worth watching. It's a long video. If you're a beginner, you probably should watch it and you might get some tips and hints of why I did things like I did. This time I thought I'd try brew shop oats rather than supermarket oats, but in the end it really didn't make a difference. And you can see the flaked barley here that I used, and malted oats. Now the malted oats really helps when you're using a lot of oats, because as you can see it has a husk, and it stays together, that husk, really well after you mill it. So it sort of saves you using rice hulls. I still use rice hulls because I was using flaked barley and rolled oats as well, or flaked oats. So we start with 22 litres, as I said, which is probably just under 6 gallon, and at about 72 degrees. We're going for about a 67 degree mash. Now of course the salts will be different for your water. I can't really help you there. You'll have to work that out in Brewfather or Beersmith. I gently lower the mash pipe in. I always just check that it's seated properly before I start putting the grain in. Rice hulls, as I mentioned, and then we get the grain in. You've seen me do this 100 times, so we'll rush through this. But take your time, mix it in, make sure it's all nice and wet. Now I added the flour at the end of this mash in, just so you could see it better. But I found out after doing several of these that it's just easier to mix it in with your grain and you don't even realise that flour is there. Of course, you don't have to use the oat flour, but then you'd have a 2-oat NEIPA. But like realistically, yes, you can take it out of the recipe. Your numbers will be down a little bit, or you can replace it with grain. But all this can be adjusted with dextrose. Pre-boil, just remember that your pre-boil might look really low because we're adding the lactose at the end of boil. So there'll be a huge discrepancy between your pre-boil and post-boil, well, much more than a normal recipe. So just keep that in mind and don't get scared when you see how low the pre-boil looks. The dextrose is up to you. You can run with the numbers if you want, or you can boost it up with dextrose. Dextrose is very, very common in these type of beers. Once we're happy that we're all mixed in, put the lid on and leave it for 5 minutes just to settle down before we put the pump on. Start with the pump nice and slow. Could and probably will be a very, very tough mash for some people. Some people have no issues at all. Depends a lot on your crush and your experience with these type of mashes. Just take your time, everything will be fine. To be honest, it doesn't really matter if you've got no flow. As long as you get your temperatures about right, and you'll see in this video that I actually turned the pump off for half an hour just to show you that it's not going to matter. I brewed a lot in the Brew one that didn't even have a pump, and there was no issues at all. And mine really isn't going that bad. Probably actually been about another 10 minutes. We're nearly at a time where I'll take a pH reading. I'm not too worried. I know I stirred it originally really well, and unless it starts backing up, I probably don't need to go right down to the bottom. But I should say, if you do, because you know last batch was a bit thicker than this, not much though. There's a few ways. If you're worried about losing temperature, I wouldn't worry too much. You can sort of fill the top up like this. You shouldn't turn the pump on full after you've just stirred. But then you can turn the pump off for a while and just let that soak down, and that, you know, gets some of that hot work from the bottom up to the top. A lot of beginners really worry about the differences in temperature. I don't think you need to. I just find after all these years of using these that it sorts itself out. The more you stuff around, the more you have the lid off, the more you stir, the more you take temperatures, it will go out of whack. I've talked about it before. There's a phase as it goes through heating, a couple of degrees lower, a couple of degrees higher, but that sort of keeps an equilibrium in the middle, and so you're better off just leaving it. It's not, if you've got a little bit of flow, up to good flow, then you can just put the lid on and leave it set to whatever temperature you want. Just do that. You're much better off. If you're someone that takes temperatures all the time, you're doing more damage than good. See, that's sunk down again quite fast. So I'm just going to put this back on for a little while, and I'm going to take a reading in a couple of minutes of pH to see how we're going. Whenever you turn the pump off, pull that out of the wort, otherwise it will suck grain up and down into your pump. Because if you're getting grain in your pump, the false bottom stops any grain getting past. So the only way it can get into your pump is back down through the pickup tube. Not only the false bottom stops it, the mash pipe stops it. So if you're getting grain in your pump, there's only one way it can be getting in there, and that's from the siphon. When you turn this off in there and you turn the pump off, it sucks back, and that's where you get your blockages. And that's where a lot of people mess up, because they blow gas down there to clear it, and what they're actually doing is pushing the grain further in. Not all the time, but I've seen it happen. Let's see, I've dropped off a bit there.
At this stage, like we're nearly 15-20 minutes in, there's no harm in even turning off the pump. Put the lid on and just let it sit. Especially if you've got it insulated. It's really good if you've got it insulated. I haven't got the insulation on today. Probably should have, but I'm going to take a reading for pH. So here we go. Even though I'm having good flow, I'm going to do this for you guys. I'm going to turn off the pump, put the lid on and just leave it sit. It'll be fine. It will be fine. I used Series 1 for years without any pump and the beers worked. I'll leave that, put this sample in the fridge for 15 minutes in the freezer to cool down. Let's have a look. So it's been about half an hour in the mash now. That's okay. Let's get this pump on and see what our flow is going to be like, eh? Just for the last half, just for the kick of it. But to be honest, it's probably all done by now already. But I haven't used those flaked oats. As I said, they're new flaked oats, new flaked barley, new malted oats. So we'll just let it go a bit longer. See, those oats still look, they don't even look cooked or much different, to be honest. But let's just see how we go. I'll start slow, of course, at first. Oh, I mean, that's enough anyway. Been another 5 minutes and we're doing pretty good. I'm happy with that. Haven't backed up much at all. So I'll just leave that till the end of mash. It can't be long now. We can have a look. I'm just going to go straight into mash out. This will take some time to get up to mash out, and I'm in no hurry. Some people will skip mash out, whatever. I'm in no hurry. Because it's got a slow flow, it will take a long time to get this whole mass right up to mash out. It doesn't really matter if you don't, but I'm going to give it some time. You know, it'll probably take 15-20 minute ramp time, 10 minutes, probably half an hour. By the time I change the temperature and let it go, it'll probably be half an hour. Still keep an eye on it. You never know when it's going to start backing up and your flow gets restricted or something. Just thought I'd show you something. I've noticed I'm backing up a little bit, and like I had that perfect flow through that whole half an hour into the mash. I know we're still okay though, but we are backing up more in the mash out. So you just got to keep an eye on it. That's all I'm saying. Mine's fine. I'm not going to touch it. If it gets much higher, I might just give it a stir a little bit or turn the pump down a bit. That's going to do me. I'm just going to pull the basket now. It's actually looking quite clear, but don't panic. This has happened in nearly every NEIPA I've brewed before. It'll change. You'll see it once it's sparged. We're right on the 30. I find if you go between, you don't want to go over the 8 if you can avoid it, but sometimes you lose sight of the 30. But you know, if you just stay just under that 8 gallons, usually right. That was about right. I mean, there will be some more drain out in the pot down there, but that was 22 litre mash in and 16 litre sparge.
I did my usual strain coming up to the boil, but see, that's not really good to do if you're doing first wort hopping like I planned for. So I just strain for a little while and then I stop, and before it comes up to the boil I'll put my first wort hops in.
Yep. This is my 6 grams of Warrior. You could leave this out if you wanted to, if you didn't want any bitterness at all in there, but I just like that, just that touch.
And 5 to 10 minutes before the end of the boil, we'll add the lactose and yeast nutrient.
Yeast nutrient, lactose.
And if you don't own a second Robo Brew or Brewzilla, it's handy to have an extra return arm or recirc arm, because I can take the one out I was using for the mash and I can swap over to the one for my chiller. So while that was boiling, I was running hot water around 90 degrees from my HLT through the counterflow chiller to get it all ready and clean and sanitized for the end of the boil.
Super quick warning again, do not let this pipe here, which is, I've got hot work going in there and cold water going in the bottom. You can't really see where the cold water from the tap is. So this will be hot and warm water coming out here. If that gets hot and kinks and blocks, this pipe's going to get really hot and could burst from the pressure of the water. You don't want this ever or to shut off, whether you kink it out there or you've got a tap there to stop the flow. Never do that. Always control the flow by the inlet of water and you'll be happy ever after. Just going to turn off the elements.
So when time's up for the 60-minute boil, we turn off the elements. I just wait for it to settle down a bit, then start the pump. Be careful because there'll be a bit of air in your system there in the chiller and it will bubble up a bit. It might be an idea to hold it out of the wort until the wort comes through and then put it back in. And we're chilling down to our 80 degrees before we add our whirlpool hops.
Saying 82 down the bottom, I doubt it, it's really 82 up the top. 95. Yeah, 82. By the time I go and turn that hose off, you're going to be right. Yes. Whirlpool arm. This time I'm using the bought one. I just want to keep these clean. I don't want, I've got to use that to chill again. Turn on the pump. Start the whirlpool. It's good enough for me. 79 point, that's nearly perfect. And 50 grams Citra Simcoe Amarillo. Half an hour. There we go. A few minutes left. I might just turn off the whirlpool just for the last few minutes just to let it settle.
I remove the whirlpool arm. Be careful, things are very hot. And this is where it's handy, I can just plug the chiller straight back in. And by the end of that whirlpool, we're down near 75 degrees or even lower, so it easily chills it in one pass straight into the fermenter. It's a very simple setup, but works very effectively. I recommend using London Ale 3. You can use London Fog, or Verdant yeast I found was good too. Into the fermenter, 19 degrees.
That is a fair cone, isn't it?
2 days later, we do our first dry hop.
We are at High Krausen, and that is quite a big Krausen.
This recipe, I am dry hopping at 20 grams a litre, and I'm starting with 100 grams of Citra, 50 grams of Simcoe, and 50 grams of Amarillo. And when you're fermenting under pressure, you do have to be careful. I sort of recommend, if you know you're going to be dry hopping early like this to ferment under about a low PSI, like a 5 PSI or something, just because sometimes when you open that lid you can get a lot of foam come up. If you want to up it after the first dry hop to 10 PSI or something, go ahead. So I brewed this on the 15th. The first dry hop was the 17th. The second dry hop was the 20th. It might be different. Just watch how your yeast is going. And you do the last dry hop like you would dry hop any other beer just before ferment is finished. Again, be careful of foam up. You can see I have a lot of bubbling coming up here when I let the pressure out. So I let some pressure out and then I walked away and just let it settle down a bit. This part of the video was going to be another Brewzilla video, but I'm not really impressed with the way it worked. I know people have used it with bottles and they flush the bottle and they do all this stuff. I just wanted to try it as a funnel. 125 Citra, 125 Brew-1 to be nice and quick. So you can take it off, add the funnel, which is half a Coke bottle, and just add your hops in without having to take the whole lid off. A little bit safer from oxygen. But I just found the hops got clogged up and I had to use a chopstick to push them through. Like the beer was fine, perfectly fine, and other beers I've just gone through the top on the second dry hop too. No issues at all. The key is to be gentle, be fast, and do it before the end of ferment. I don't purge. I've explained why before. So that's it, a whole lot of hops. I let it go another 4 days and it was finished. Then I crash chilled for 4 days too. The crash chill is very important. I've talked about it in other videos. You must get that hop matter out, otherwise it'll end up in your keg, and that's why you'll get a bitter NIPA, because you have all that hop matter. You need to get rid of it.
Meaty, beaty, big and bouncy. Alright, so you've seen it all to the dry hop. Now the next most important thing is the kegging. Whack it in a keg. Make sure it's a flushed keg, CO2. Try not to have water in there that might have any oxygen in it. I don't use star sand for them anymore. I use sodium metabisulfite. You've heard me talk about that stuff for years and years and years. I sort of stopped for a while because it went out of favour and I was getting hate mail. But since some articles last year, the year before, have come out, people have started to realise how good it can be at oxygen scavenging. And that's one of the reasons it's used as a preservative in some things. But don't think of it like that. We're using it as an oxygen scavenger. So what I do now, I fill up my 19 litre keg right to the brim with water. I put in about 3 grams of sodium metabisulfate. Now that's a little bit more than you need. It's probably nearly 3 times as much as you need. But what that does is you give it a stir and a little bit will dissolve and do its job in the water, and the rest will sink down to the bottom. And it sits down near that little dimple in the bottom of the keg. So once you've closed the keg and you've purged it, you've pushed all that sodium metabisulfite solution out, in that little dimple at the bottom, you've got a tiny little bit of sodium metabisulfite left. And even though there's going to be a little bit of water in that bulb at the bottom of your keg, it's going to have no oxygen in it. That's where you want to be, and you'll get results that last. As I mentioned in other videos, you don't have to do the 20 grams a litre if you don't want to dry hop, but I tell you what, I paid off in this one. It paid off in spades. Not only do I like it, I've shared it with some friends and they were blown away. So that's, you know, that's good stuff. I will brew it again. So as you can probably tell, I'm super excited about this beer. It is just, it's a good beer. It's everything I wanted it to be. And sometimes that hard work pays off, doesn't it? So anyway, thanks for watching. If you haven't watched the other videos in the series and you're a beginner, it's a good idea to watch those other videos. You'll get a lot of good information. Thanks for watching. Like if you like the video. Subscribe if you like the video. Thanks to my patrons, because without them, these videos couldn't happen. Cheers. Green greeds. Or green greed. I haven't decided yet. Cheers.